And welcome back everyone to the recap of rounds number 5 and 6 of the Sligo Chess Festival. Today was another double round and a very tough day for me. Had a pretty rough night of sleep, and then to play a double round was definitely quite difficult, and I had a very long game now against the number 2 tournament seed, against Alexander Krastev, and it was a very difficult and long game, as we are about to see after this one. So in the morning I played against a Spanish player, Alvarez Jimenez, with 1868, which was a bit of a surprise. Like, I was not doing that badly in the tournament. I had 3 out of 4. I made 2 draws before, and I was expecting someone with a bit of a higher rating, and yeah, but I cannot choose the pairings. The Swiss manager does, so I played against Mr. Alvarez Jimenez. Let's have a quick look at that game. I mean, especially with the white pieces, but in general, in this rating range, usually I should be able to win. Yeah? Like, before there were some hiccups, especially with black, it's often a bit difficult for me to create chances, but this game was definitely more smooth. But yeah, the one against Krastev, definitely not, as we will see later. Anyway, enough talking, let's get into it. I played knight f3. I did not prepare a single minute for this game, because the round was at 9:30 in the morning. So I just played my Reti course, which you can find in the video description down below. The links to that, if you need a full repertoire for white, a positional one based on strategic understanding, then make sure to check that out. And yeah, I played a line in this game, which I've also given in my course. So knight f3, d5, g3, knight f6, bishop g2. This is all still pretty standard, and what I have played now in already a million of games, basically. My opponent went for the very classical setup with c5 and knight c6. Went for d4. Generally, this is kind of the only option here for white to try and play for an advantage. I've also played something like d3 in the past, and went for a King's Indian reversed, but yeah, d4, objectively speaking, is a better move for sure. My opponent went e6 here. Another option is to go for this line, to play a Grunfeld with black, where white is a tempo up. But this tempo can be quite important in those lines, because they are generally quite sharp. And in the Grunfeld, of course, it's in the classical Grunfeld, white is the one playing for an advantage. But here, white has a clear tempo up, and therefore here it is white who is also playing for an edge, with ideas like knight c3, queen a4, bishop g5 sometimes, because this extra tempo is quite valuable in this concrete line. Yeah, he played e6. Now I went c4. Actually, in my course, I did not give c4. I said that incorrectly earlier, because in my course I recommended b3. But until here, it was still my my course prep, what I gave there. And in my course, I recommended b3, which is quite a practical line. We've also reached that with some other move orders, like, for example, if black goes here, and now c5. My idea was also to go for b3 in my course, avoiding a lot of theory in this Benoni type of positions. And there can be some transpositions. For example, if now knight c6, then d4 is going back to the line we've just seen. So b3 is playable. I've played that already a couple of times myself in the past, but today I felt like going for c4. My opponent went bishop e7. The main move here is d takes c4, which is definitely the critical line. I wasn't sure what I would have played here. There are many ideas for why d takes c5 is, I mean, a bit too solid for my taste against a much lower rated opponent. Would have still been an option. There is this line here. This is how the theory goes. When white keeps some initiative, there are also other lines, like I think knight e5 is possible, knight a3, queen a4, of course, is another big move. But he went for bishop e7, which now allows me to transpose to the classical Tarrasch variation, c takes d5, e takes d5. I was also considering knight takes d5 here. I guess I checked this at some point. It should not be too great for black, but I wasn't so sure. I probably would have taken and went for something like queen c2. Also knight d2, knight d4 is an idea. And the bishop on c8 is quite passive. This is kind of black's main problem in this position. Yeah, but he took e takes d5, I went knight c3. And now he went h6, and now I went b3, and now we are back into my course actually with this b3 idea. This is what I recommended in my chess-based course, with some other move orders. Like h6 is already quite uncommon. I think Black usually starts with short castle, but h6 does make some sense to avoid some bishop g5 lines. So it's not like he made a bad move with this. After short castle, I also recommended b3. There are actually some move orders where we can reach that. Let's just quickly, I can explain that. If Black goes e6, this is what I gave in my course: c4, short castle, b3, c5, and now if this comes, then we are already committed to b3. Therefore, it made a lot of sense to recommend this setup with b3 and bishop b2, because we anyway can reach it quite often. Also, if Black plays c5 here. But let's get back to the game. Yeah, he went h6, which now I would not say that h6 is the most necessary move in the b3 lines. Like here, Black would probably not go h6, like it's a bad move, but the main line is knight e4, bishop b2, bishop f6. And there's actually a nice trick here for which Black can run into. Knight e4 is the move I recommended, and if Black wants to trap our piece with b5, which looks like now White is in big trouble, because after taking, White cannot take back because the bishop on b2 is hanging. But actually White is clearly better now with rook c1, and White is just winning back the piece and is going to be a pawn up. Black can give back the piece like this, but he will most likely drop the pawn on b5, and White is clearly better here. But of course, Black does not need to go for this. I think some b6 or something is possible, but still White keeps some pull in those lines. So I'm still quite happy with my recommendation from back then. But he went h6. Yeah, this was how the game went. Bishop e6 seemed like a sound move. It looks a bit passive, but it's still a better square than g4 probably, because on e6 at least it's protecting the pawn on d5. I took on c5 now, which is a bit of a strange decision. Like my first idea was to go rook c1 here, which is of course the more natural move, but I was unsure about c4, and I was trying to figure out this e4, bishop g4, and I just couldn't really. Well, I was honestly lazy to calculate it. I've just seen that d5, knight e5 looks unpleasant for me. I think after the game I checked it briefly, and apparently e5 is very strong, which I didn't really consider because of knight d5. But apparently this is just winning. Takes, and just h3. And at some point the knight is able to move, and then I'll just pick up the pawn on c4, and yeah, I'm gonna win the game. So rook c1 therefore would have been probably a bit more precise, because c4 is not really an option, and I can still take on c5 next. In the game I played like this: takes, knight a4. If rook c1 now, I didn't like queen e7 first. And now the problem is, if I go knight e4 now, then bishop a3 is going to come. And now he can simplify the position, and I thought he should be quite solid. So I went knight e4 first. He went bishop d6. I thought bishop e7 is a bit more natural. I would have still gone knight d4 here. But he went here, knight d4, bishop d7, and rook c1. And knight e5 was where things started to go wrong for him. Instead, I'm not sure what you should do. Computer says rook e8 is possible. I guess this does seem more natural. Can I go knight c5 here? I mean, this was definitely my idea, to go knight c5 on the next move. He could take on c5, that would be possible. Of course, weakening the dark squares, but he does have some ideas to play for the light squares, some bishop g4 ideas perhaps. There are similar ideas in the Duke of Towers as well. The rook e8 more natural probably, and yeah, something like this. Maybe also knight e4 could be possible. And Black is not doing too badly, but White is a bit better. Went knight e5, now knight c5 came. Actually, is this the best move? Knight c3 is even better. Okay. Yeah, but this seemed natural. He went rook b8, which, yeah, actually this is quite an instructive moment, because he should have given away this bishop and not the bishop on d7. Still, I'm definitely better here, but now he can at least try to hang on to this pawn. I'm actually not sure how. Maybe some queen e7 or queen b6 is possible. But in the game, if we just see that, after I take on d7, he's in big trouble because the pawn on d5 is often quite difficult to defend. Still, I did not play this game precisely at all. I don't know if it was because of the time we were playing, or yeah, maybe I was just tired. And honestly, I also had the feeling that I should be able to win faster or in a more clean way against a much lower rated opponent, and that I should just be able to checkmate him already at this point after 17 moves, which I guess is not the right way to think about it. As long as you win, it doesn't really matter how you win, especially if you were never in any danger. I guess that's the takeaway. Yeah, here queen e2 was not right. Much stronger is to take on c8 and go knight e2 and then knight f4. I'm not sure why I didn't go for that here. Like, I often thought about this idea with knight e2, but for some reason here it didn't really occur to me. Maybe this queen f5 I was maybe briefly thinking about, and then he can get into c2. But white is actually winning here according to the engine. Now bishop takes d5, and then b7 is also hanging, and everything is just falling apart. But yeah, queen e2 was still fine. He went a6, otherwise I'm threatening knight b5. Now, I spent a lot of time here and went rook cd1, which is another pretty strange move, I would say. I had some other ideas, like rook c2 was another idea which I had, with the idea that if he takes rook c8, I will go queen b1, and I'm avoiding knight e4. But then, like, honestly, I have no idea why I did not go for it. I just decided to keep as many pieces on the board. And generally, there's this rule that if you're playing against an isolated pawn, you should keep as many heavy pieces on the board, which I was here trying to follow. But of course, it does look quite artificial to play a move like rook cd1 here, because the rook on f1 is not doing much, and it's still not easy for me to actually double the rooks here. Yeah, so rook c2, for example, would have been better here. Engine also says to take on c8 and go back queen d1, so that already tells us quite a lot that my decision with queen e2 was not great, and I can just immediately try to go after this pawn on d5 like this. Because the thing is, if I do that with rook d1, he always has ideas with knight e4, and then I don't really have a place to move the knight to, and I want to go to e2 and then to f4 to put pressure there. Anyway, I went for rook cd1, and also knight f3 is a terrible move in my opinion. It would have allowed my opponent, for example, to trade here and then go bishop e5 next. I'm not sure how I would have taken here, but for example like this, and it's actually not clear why black should be so much worse here. White is definitely still better, and I would have definitely kept great winning chances, most likely would have won the game, but definitely wouldn't have been easy at this point, because black is protecting the pawn on d5 pretty well. The position is quite simplified. So yeah, knight f3 was really not a great move. Anyway, he went queen e6, and now at least I understood my mistake and went back, and now went bishop a1, which at least I think this was a small highlight of the game. Because I honestly didn't really see what I can do here, because I don't have this knight e2. Knight f3 is, as we discussed, is generally not the idea. Knight c2 looks clumsy because the knight is always hanging. I cannot comfortably double on the d file because of knight e4 ideas. So I decided to go bishop a1 here with the idea of going queen b2 and then queen b1. And then I'm stopping knight e4. So I could have ideas with rook d2, rook d1, or also with knight f5 once my queen is on b1. And that actually worked pretty well in the game. So he went bishop c5, queen b2 now. He probably could have done something better at this point, but it's also not so easy for him to see what else he can do. I mean, he tried to play actively at the very least. Queen g4, queen b1, rook cd8, he played h3, queen h5, and now queen f5. And black is now in big trouble. So maybe there was something better than rook cd8. I don't know if he can consider g6, but it's also weakening the long diagonal. Black is definitely in a lot of trouble here already. But here I went for queen f5, and he went for this endgame with bishop takes d4, which is worse than this one, but also here position should be borderline lost for black. My knight is great on f5, and I'm just threatening to double rooks here on the d file, and black is probably going to lose the pawn on d5 sooner or later. It's also not so easy actually to get rid of this knight. He would have to go h5 first and then g6. And okay, then the knight can go back, and generally this pressure on d5 is not disappearing easily. But he took on d4, and now I took on h5, intermediate exchange, and this position is actually completely winning for white. If some of you are new to chess, it might be difficult to believe at this point. But first of all, I have the bishop pair here. Second of all, the pawn on d5 is very weak, and most likely is even going to fall almost by force. I mean, he gave it to me for free by playing knight c6, but even if he goes for something like knight f6, I could double on the d file. I probably would have done that, rook fd1, and probably just taking on d5 on the next move. I don't see what black can do. I could even go for e4. That would be another idea. Or just slowly gain space, like f4, g4, maybe then even g5, and then take on d5. This should be quite an easy technical win. But he went knight c6, and I think the rest was more or less simple. Rook c1, rook c8, and now b4. Another nice moment. Want to get a4 and then b5, and I don't really think that black has any defense against that. King f8, a4, and here he actually lost on time. But yeah, he could have also resigned, because if he goes, for example, king e7 or b5, and I'm going to win another pawn on b7. If I wanted to make knight a7, take, and yeah, winning another pawn. Also, this knight is out of the game on h5, so this is an easy win. Yeah, honestly, I was quite frustrated at some point in the game. Like, as I said earlier, I thought against such a, with all due respect, against such a low-rated opponent, I should be able to win quicker or faster, but I think that was just quite an immature mindset on my part. If you guys have any opinion on that, let me know in the comments. Would be interesting to hear what you think about that in general. Like, if you have some specific style, if you're playing against much lower rated opponents, or some specific goals, or yeah, whatever. Let's move on to the next game, which was much longer. And now I'm realizing already for the first game we took quite a lot of time, so this is probably going to take, the recap is going to be pretty long once again, but some of you have commented that you actually enjoyed that. So let's get into it. You've just seen the final position of the game, and you can also see here that the game ended in my favor. I actually did not mean to spoil the result, but since anyway many of you probably have watched the live stream, I can say that I was able to win my game against International Master Krastev after a long fight. Now it is almost 9 p.m. and the game started at 4 p.m. So it was like 4.5 hours, I think, that the game took, and many moves as well. So he's an e4 player. He went for e4, and honestly, I was in a bit of a tricky situation before the game. Like, I was really contemplating whether I should go full out for a win and play like a fighting opening, or just play super solid. And you know, if it's a draw, if it's a draw, because I was just very tired, and I was honestly just thinking of doing something incredibly boring like the Berlin. But then I decided, okay, if I still want to compete for tournament victory, and also generally for my rating, I need to play this game. Yeah? I cannot just be okay with a draw in this situation, even if I have the black pieces, which, as we now know, turned out to be a good decision. So I went for the Sicilian once again, which I've already did in round number 2, which actually worked pretty well there. I was just not able to win the game in the end against Zach. But I did again go for the Sicilian with d6, but Krastev did not opt for the open Sicilian, but instead for bishop b5 check, the so-called Moscow. And I went for bishop d7. I had some quick preparation before the game, like honestly just a few minutes. I checked this line with bishop d7 before the tournament, funnily enough, with a student, so that came in pretty handy, and we had some nice ideas there. But this idea, which I played in the game, actually I just found like 20 minutes before the game. I just briefly turned on the engine. It was saying that it's sort of playable, and I just went for it. Yeah, so I actually did not check this game at all yet with the computer. I do see the evaluation there, but I don't see the moves. Did not check the game at all yet, so I'm quite curious what we all did wrong. He went for c4, which he has done in the past already. Bishop takes d7 is the main line. And what I played in the game, it already, I played a6, which is not supposed to be like the best move in the position. But I think it's quite a practical line, especially if you go for this one with knight takes d7 here. Because the positions tend to be quite similar, there might be some transpositions, at least possibly. And it does avoid some theory, I think, because I was often struggling with against this line with c4. Like, you're supposed to go knight c6 here, but then there's this with e5, and white has some ideas with h4. It's all okay for black, but it's not so it's not so easy in my opinion. And also these lines with d4 are not always so easy for black. So I went a6. Now he has to take knight takes d7. He went knight c3 and now e6. And this was the whole point, that I don't want to develop this knight to f6. We will see why in a second. If I go knight f6, then I will not have the idea as I played it in the game, so it's going to make sense in just once I show you the game. So e6, short castle, and now I went knight e5. And the idea is to have this knight on g8 so that I have knight e7 and knight c6. If I play that with a knight on f6, like here, for example, then my knight is a bit misplaced on f6. I guess this position is still sort of okay for black. I think there were some games like this where white can go f4. But it makes a lot of sense that this knight would be much better on c6, where it's protecting the e5 square and also looking towards the d4 square, which is white's biggest weakness. Yeah, so this was the small idea, knight e5. I don't think that there are so many games here. Don't recall. I think I didn't even open the online database for this. But the one thing I do recall is that when I checked this, I saw that the only move that gave white like hopes of an advantage is rook b1 here. And you know, I mean, I was sitting at the board then, and was a bit afraid that he might find it. But like honestly, I was thinking during the preparation that no one in this world is going to play rook b1 if they don't know the line, and I think the line is basically unknown. Even after rook b1, it's still completely playable for black. But I think this was quite a nice practical preparation, to be honest. Would be nice to see. I will check afterwards if there have been many games before in this line. Otherwise, I would be happy to have invented something interesting. Yeah, so there is, by the way, also knight e5 immediately. I saw some strange stuff here, like there were some games with queen h5. This can also be looked into. I think there was some queen d6 or something. Again, if black gets this e6 and knight to c6, black is perfectly fine, can even play for an advantage in many positions, because white is always stuck with the backward d-pawn. So I think there's quite some room here for creative ideas. So short castle, knight e5. And the whole idea of rook b1 is that white should try to get b4 in as quickly as possible. Otherwise, I will get knight e7 and knight c6 again. And now if knight e7, then white can just go and play b4. Also, I cannot take the pawn because of queen a4. At least that's what I was thinking during the game. And b5, knight takes b5. That's what I was thinking. Actually, now that I look at it, knight b6, knight c7, king e7. Does the knight get lost? Computer says queen c6. And yeah, rook b8, knight takes a6. Yeah, and white is winning. Yeah, so I think what I wanted to do here was knight e7, and after b4, computers wanted to play some rook b8. Maybe it was immediately, or take rook b8. I was thinking about this during the game, but actually this is not so great. What was it once again? Rook b8 immediately. b4. Ah, so computer wants actually to take on b4. Okay, that does look a bit ugly. I didn't want to do that. So I didn't even check rook b1 seriously. I mean, it's honestly quite embarrassing, but I just thought, okay, if he plays rook b1, then congratulations, he will just be better and I will have to suffer, yeah? Because it's just such a difficult move to find. Yeah, in the game I was thinking about going for some knight e7, b4, and some position like this I was actually not so sure about, because if I'm able to consolidate, then I can be completely fine as well. Like, I don't see... White is better here, 0.50 or something. Maybe this was actually what I checked before the game. Looks at least sort of acceptable for black. Anyway, he went for the human move, which is d3, which is also not bad by any means, and white can still try to fight for an advantage, but at least now I get a completely independent line with knight e7. And often the idea for white is to go knight e1 in those positions, and then f4, but here black has g6. This was the only thing I still knew about the line. And now f4, knight c6, and white doesn't even get f5 next, and black has very nice control over the d4 square, will play for b5 at some point, and I think the engine already preferred black here. But he went for bishop e3, and now I did something, yeah, a bit strange looking. After the game we briefly discussed it, and honestly I wasn't sure if it's great, but it seems like it was actually possible. So I went knight 7 to c6. I could have also taken and went knight c6 now, and this is what I was thinking about mostly. Maybe this would have been another possibility. I was looking at queen g3 in the game, g6, f4, bishop g7, and f5, and I was not sure how to evaluate this position in general. Bishop e5, I looked at queen h3, and or even this I was thinking at some point to provoke the weakness here, but yeah, here black is better because g5 will even come. Yeah, so this would have been playable. This is white's best on some queen h6 or something, but yeah, some position like this, but black has nothing to worry about. One plan could be bishop f6, short castle, long castle, probably risky because of some knight d5 ideas, but yeah, objectively it's okay for black. But I went for this, and now he played knight e1, which I realized must have been his idea, and that was actually quite smart of him to play knight e3 first, so that I have to commit myself. Obviously I cannot start with g6 now, because now he can take and then he can take on c5. Actually, quite interesting here would have been the move g6 or even g5. I thought about both in the game. G6 I thought was quite interesting. I'm curious what the computer says here. f4, knight d7, f5, bishop g7. I thought it would be playable, but I'm often a bit scared of those positions if white gets the pawn to f5. So I wanted to avoid it if possible. It's still playable, but it looks a bit scary. Like I was looking at ideas with knight f3, queen e1, queen g3, some stuff like this, and I did not really like it. g5 I also considered, and this is probably the most interesting way to continue here, but I was just not sure if it's possible. I checked one or two lines before the game where g5 was like sort of okay, some 0.40 or 0.50, and it looked interesting, but I just yeah, didn't have the courage to play it in the game. I went knight d4, which is also interesting. I am losing a lot of time here, but at least I'm getting this nice setup. If he goes f4, then I go knight ec6. And then again, I would go g6, bishop g7, and short castle. And the main thing is here that he does not get f5 as easily. I mean, here he can play it, but now I'm pretty fast. Bishop e7, I will get both my knights onto perfect squares. Maybe bishop g5 at some point, and I thought I should be completely okay here. I was also considering b4 here, which computer says is the critical move. I was actually not so sure yet what I would do. I was thinking about a couple of ideas. Knight ec6 was one of them, practically, or asking him to go b5 now. And I was looking at some positions like this, and I wasn't sure how to evaluate them. Again, I'm losing a lot of time, but still the center is closed, so I can probably do that. Knight e5, and if f4, knight d7. It is playable. If possible, I would prefer to get the bishop to this long diagonal, and if I can consolidate, then I also have some pressure along the a file, and black has the better pawn structure. Yeah, so this would have been another possibility for white, but he took on d4, which immediately fixes the structure. And he told me he was quite optimistic here in general. That, okay, I, of course, have the problem with the bad bishop, but on the other hand, I have more space. And also his knight on e2 is actually pretty bad piece in the long term. So the position now I'm seeing is objectively completely equal. Yeah, interesting to observe. He went queen a4 with the idea to go knight c2, knight b4 sometimes, or sometimes also b4. Generally, his play on the king side is probably not the right plan. Like, maybe I can go g6, but just in general, once he goes f5, I will get my bishop to maybe to e3. Even if I play e5 here, I don't really think that white is going to checkmate me, because I do have a lot of counterplay coming on the queen side as well. Also, of course, I don't need to castle here necessarily. Just a side note. Yeah, so he went queen a4, now e5. I need to protect the pawn. Knight c2. Now queen d7 is important. Knight b4 I thought is a strategical threat, because if I go bishop e7, maybe the engine also doesn't care about something like this. But I thought now he gets the knight to d5, and at least it looks unpleasant. Yeah. Now already the computer also says that white is better. So I wanted to avoid that, queen d7. Now he went b4. If he goes knight b4 now, then I would take. And now this knight is not coming to d5. We even briefly spoke about that line after the game. Now it's an important detail that d5 is not possible in view of queen a5. And whenever I take, he can take on e5 with check. Yeah. What was I about to say? That's why bishop e7 here would have been my move most likely. And the position is probably around balanced, I would say. Yeah. Chances for both sides. Maybe a better chance than in the game for him, even though in the game it was also equal. It just, from a practical standpoint, maybe this was easier to play for him, but it's still not so clear what he's playing for. Like, he could go for some a4, a5, but the thing is, if white plays on the king side, then black is probably trying to play on the queen side, and also the other way around. If white now tries to do something on the queen side, then at some point black might think of countering with f5. Obviously also d5 was now always there, so white probably should even move the queen first. I was quite happy generally here with my chances. But he went b4, now I went bishop e7. Actually g6 is also possible. Quite interesting. Like, I was just thinking at this point that I want to finish my development as quickly as possible, but the upside is that I can go to e7 with my knight. That's what the computer wants to do. Still, bishop e7 also does not change the evaluation much. He went b5. And now I was thinking about two options. Knight a7, which I played in the game, which is probably the best move, but also knight d8. Because knight a7, what I played is, positionally speaking, is a terrible move probably. Because the knight is not doing much. And if white can consolidate, then the knight on a7 is just out of the game. But I was hoping that he cannot consolidate. That was what... why I played it, because with knight a7 I'm stopping him from getting knight b4, knight d5 once again, because b5 is hanging. If I play knight d8, then he can play that, I thought. I cannot take because the rook on a8 is hanging. And now he would get the knight to d5. I was still thinking about this, and it didn't seem bad for black either. Computer says white is a bit better, with ideas with f4 now, but this also seemed solid because I get the knight to c5 where it's attacking d3. But just out of principle, I didn't want to allow his knight to d5 because, like, once it gets there, it feels like white has achieved something and his play seems more active just in general. So I think that was a good decision. I went knight a7, rook fb1, short castle, queen b3. He went rook b1 to protect the pawn on b5. And now, again, was, I think, a very important decision, and actually a nice exercise if you want to try to think here what is black's best way of continuing. I think it's a good it's a good exercise, which I might show to my students in the future. So white now is, I would say, threatening to go a4. Like if I do nothing at all, then he would go a4, and whenever I take, he can take back with this pawn, and now finally get the knight to d5 quickly. Still, might not be lost here, but now the knight on a7 is really has a sad existence. If it would be on c5, black is doing very well, but the knight is very, very far away from getting to c5, and therefore I didn't want to allow that. So I took on b5, c takes b5, and now d5, which was kind of a positional long-term pawn sacrifice, because it was clear to me that it would be possible that I wouldn't get back the pawn immediately, but I'm finally freeing my bishop on e7, and this knight is now not really joining the game. So I think that was a good decision. Otherwise, again, white will play a4, and then knight b4, knight d5. I actually can also play differently. Like, this is quite surprising. Bishop d8, I also thought about that in the game, to try and get the bishop to a5, like this. Yeah, computer says I can just play like this. But again, I just didn't want to allow the knight here, but of course he's right that I can exchange it with knight e7. Still, I think what I played in the game did ask some other practical questions, even here. Engine is fantastic, it just wants to go h5, h4 next, and claims it's 0-0. Yeah, I went d5, and now he spent a lot of time thinking here, and basically all moves are 0-0 when I pull up the engine. But after queen takes d5, I felt like it gets a bit difficult to play for him. But we both really didn't see better ways to continue. E takes d5 would also be logical. Now I would have played rook f d8 most likely. I was also considering ideas with knight c8, knight b6, which the computer is also saying is possible. And yeah, some position like this. It's, yeah, chances for both sides, but in the game I felt quite comfortable here from the black side, because the knights are not really taking part in the game. The pawns on the queen side are also not really mobile, and I will probably be the one to seize control over the c-file. Yeah, knight a3 is a nice move. Computer wants to play that. Yeah, that's nice to try and regroup the knight. Now I should probably give up my bishop on a3, and white will be stuck with the knight with a bad knight here, and the position is probably equal. Maybe knight c8, knight b6, knight d5, something like this. But yeah, white does have, of course, some play on the queen side. Should be a draw with perfect play from both sides, but still a lot of play ahead, of course. But he took on d5 with the queen, and now we got this endgame. And here, after the game, he told me about a nice trick, which he saw. If I go rook fc8 now, he can actually sacrifice the knight and now go b6, because my knight on a7 is trapped. And yeah, now white is definitely not worse anymore. Might even have a slight pull in the resulting endgame, but that was a nice trick. I even thought about rook c8, but I didn't see knight takes d4. I only saw rook b2 here, which is also possible, and now I didn't really see what I'm actually doing on the c-file, so I wanted to go after the pawn on d5. And now he went b6, which here it starts to shift apparently, objectively speaking, because this is going to be quite a weakness, and my knight is now getting back into the game as well. Computer wants to play a4 now, rook takes d5, and just play this position, knight c1. Not easy to find that, and then just some king f1. I think black, practically speaking, has the easier play here. Like, I will just bring my king to the center at some point, knight c8, maybe knight b6, and yeah, I think white needs to be careful here. Also trying to get the rook to c3 at some point. So it feels difficult already for white here, even though objectively it's nothing. He went b6, which I think helps me, because the pawn on b6 can often be weak. Knight c8, rook b5. Now I went knight d6. I was also thinking about rook a6 here. I'm actually curious if this was also a possible idea. But I wanted to play for activity. Yeah, if he goes rook c5, another move I was thinking about, I wanted to go... I was not sure which rook to take, actually. I was thinking of doing something like this, and then I'll regain the pawn, yeah. Probably similar to something like in the game, just with one pair of rooks exchanged. Yeah, so he went rook b3, now rook c8. I'm always keeping an eye on the objective evaluation, knight e8. very strange. Yeah. Anyway, rook c8 was also not a bad move. He went knight e1. Knight b4 might be a bit more active, but I thought about that in the game, but bishop d8 I wanted to play. And then he always needs to watch out for me taking there. I guess, okay, computer move g4. Whenever I take, he does have some tricks. I saw that in the game with knight c6. But I guess I can try to prepare that. Like if I go f6 first, let's say he goes king g2 and now I take. Then if knight c6, at least I have bishop d8 and still the pawn on d5 could be weak even in something like this. But yeah, now the computer will hold it, and probably the human will hold it as well. Yeah, but not easy decisions here, because whenever he goes knight b4, he's practically giving up the pawn on b6, because now the knight cannot move back anymore. So at some point I'll probably be able to pick up the pawn. Yeah, so knight e1, rook a5 now, natural. f4 and f6 was actually a mistake. I should take on f4 now. This is what the engine wants. Knight takes f4 and now just g5. Yeah, basically whatever now. And just says that this is a much better version. Like if I take on d5, for example, it's also not so clear. I have even some g4 ideas. This is what I didn't see in general here. Yeah, just trying to play for full restriction and even allowing a5. Yeah. Not so easy to understand that, I think. But I mean, it is sort of logical not to play f6 here, because now I'm kind of giving him always this e4 square, and I'm sort of ruining my pawn structure. But I was still aiming to play against the knight on e2 specifically, trying to restrict it. But of course, it's getting towards e4 pretty quickly. So even here, it was interesting. Like in the game, I was even considering to go g5 here. I'm curious if it is a viable move. Yeah, it's actually possible, but it does give away the advantage for exactly the reason why I didn't play it, because he can go g4. And now I do have quite some weaknesses on my own on the light squares. But the idea is nice in general. Like I've seen this quite often. If I would have had h5 here ready, then g5 might actually be a move to consider. Yeah, but rook a5 was good, and now in general I should just go for some position like this. Yeah. Also here, why does this not hang? Just dark squares opening up pawn down in an endgame, but black is just too active. I didn't have a good feeling for this in this game. Just white is really close to being lost here, just because of pure activity. Yeah, extra pawn is worth nothing. Rooks are doing nothing. Knight, all of the black's pieces are fantastically active, and black can again play for this idea with g5, g4. Quite instructive. Yeah, I went for f6. He went a4, which was also a smart idea, because now whenever I take on d5, he can play a5. So I didn't want to allow that. And now if rook a8, for example, he even has ideas with a6. So that's why I played rook a8 first, with the idea to only now take, and now he doesn't have a5. Played knight g3, rook c5, and now knight d2, very logical move. For some reason, computer wants to play rook b2 first. Anyway, knight d2. Bishop g5 was actually strong here. I spent some time, because there were so many interesting options to consider here, but bishop g5 is actually the strongest. There are some funny ideas, like if bishop h4, for example. This was another idea which I had. Maybe this exchange would favor me, because now then he doesn't have the bind on e4. And the trick is, if he goes knight e4, then I can do this, and now I can take on a4. The sad thing is that even with this trick, it's still not clear if I even have anything, because the knight on e4 is just so good. Yeah, so I went bishop g5. I was considering another move here as well. Rook c3 it was. Yeah, I thought this could also be good. But the thing is, it's not really threatening much. The computer says king f1, bishop g5 now. And whenever bishop g5, then he can take, yeah? Because then this bishop will be hanging. And the pawn on c3 as well. But rook c3 is also interesting, yeah? In the game, I think I was looking at a5 now. Since my rook left, I didn't like this one. And yeah, if bishop g5, I was again looking at this. Was I? Oh, now it's just not working. Bishop e3 check is there. And then c2 on the next move. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure here anymore. Rook c3 would have been another interesting idea, which looks also quite logical. I went for bishop g5 with the trick, actually, if he goes knight e4, then I wanted to take, go bishop e3 check. And if king h1, then rook takes a4 with a similar idea like earlier, with some back rank issues. Like in the line with bishop h4, we've seen it. Like if white takes here, it's checkmate. I think I didn't even mention that earlier. So yeah, if king h1 here in this line, rook takes a4, he cannot take. And otherwise, I think I'm getting pretty active. I was actually not so sure still. One nice idea which I calculated was if rook b1, then rook b5 is a very precise move, because he still cannot take any of the rooks. And now I'll take on a1 next, and then I will take on b6. So that was my idea, and I'm quite happy actually with the calculation here. I've seen this when I was thinking about bishop g5. Just as a clarification. Yeah, another interesting thing here was king f1. I thought it shouldn't work, but it got very sharp here. Again, sorry for using the engineer so much today, but I'm already quite tired and also want to see the objective evaluation here, because I was calculating this line, a5, rook takes g2, and now either of those moves, I was not 100% sure. I thought it should be mate in general, but the knight on e4 is actually a surprisingly decent defender. But I have some ideas like bishop g5 and bishop h4. Can also take on h2 even. Like one idea which I was generally looking at, like if I get another move here, then I was looking at ideas with rook f4, rook g4, rook g1, but I'm not in time here, am I? a6, b takes a6, b7. Even this is winning, yeah? I can just go rook b8 here. It's fantastic. And then rook takes b7 even. It doesn't have a defense against that. Yeah, so this seems to be winning, yeah, after all. And it also looked quite dangerous over the board. So he went knight f1, which was actually a great defensive move. Now rook a6, king f2, rook c2, king e1, and here I let the advantage slip with bishop d8, going after the pawn on b6 immediately. I generally did not want to allow him to get this a5 in quickly, but objectively speaking, I should go for this. King f7, just bring the king. It's anyway quite natural. If king d1, then, yeah, for example, rook c5, and he's probably not getting his bind. If this, then what do I do? Yeah, just take on d2 now, and king e6. Yeah, that's actually quite natural. King f7, what was I thinking here? If he goes a5, maybe king e6, just yeah. It's so natural just to bring the king. I'm not sure why I didn't play it. I went after the pawn immediately. Already also ran low on time at this point. He played king d1, rook c6, knight g3, and yeah, now he had to give the pawn, but he has full compensation here because he has the powerful knight on e4. Still, since I get the move rook b2, I have some concrete ideas. Objectively, it's equal, but practically it was not so easy for him. The game still went on for quite some time. I was just looking how many more moves we got left. So he played rook c1, only move, trying to get activity. Now I cannot take on g2 because of rook c8. So I played king f7, rook c2, rook b4, and he went to this endgame now, which was interesting. He could have also gone for, what was it? Actually, what is rook c4 take and dc4? I only in the game I only thought about this, which I thought doesn't work because I will break through with e4, and if knight d2 I can pick up this pawn. I saw that in the game. But if this, does he have any chances for a fortress? Probably not. It's not so simple. Like if he just puts the king to d3, how is this? Might be a draw. -1. There's actually knight c5 check here, so I would start with bishop e7. But this is probably a draw, yeah? with dc4. It's probably a fortress. Interesting. He went rook c5, also rook c8 would have been possible, maybe more active, but yeah, let's stick to the game for now. Rook takes c5, I played bishop e7. Yeah, felt natural. Maybe rook a2 was more precise to start with, because he was able to activate the king, how I played in the game. And I'm not sure why I allowed that. Like here I can go bishop e7, I guess. Yeah, not so precise here. Rook a2 looks much more natural. Maybe I didn't like knight d6 now that I think about it. But I can just move the king, I guess. f6 or g6. Yeah, anyway, I went bishop e7, king e2, now rook b4, trying to keep the pawn covered. King f3 in other positions should be a draw generally. But it's still, white is on the defensive because he's a pawn down. And even if I lose this weak pawn on d4, I do have some chances with the outside passer. So knight f2 surprised me a little bit, because I generally thought he would just keep the knight on e4. And like at this point, I thought he might just go back king e2. I think this is what I was thinking about. And just to keep the knight on e4, and it's going to be quite difficult for me to make progress. Because it's hard for me to bring my king to the queen side. Also, if I go b5, b4, then yeah, white can maybe go after this pawn or try to get behind the pawn, which could also be an idea. Still, white needs to be careful, but I thought he would just stick to this setup with the knight on e4. Yeah, so he played knight f2, bishop d6. Was thinking of doing this here and taking the pawn, and he cannot trap my bishop because of bishop d1. Still, many of these lines should probably hold for white. But he went rook h5, h6, g3, king e6, rook h4. At this point, I'm actually winning again. Bishop f6 was a terrible move, played with 5 seconds on the clock. I should activate my rook instead and put the bishop to d6. Actually, very, very natural. Covering a lot of squares, and now just pushing the pawn. Because white has lost really a lot of time, the king will come. This is how the top engine line goes, and at some point I guess black will be able to advance the pawn, maybe now even already, yeah, for example. I went bishop f6, yeah, trying to keep d4 covered, and also g7. This is why I played it. But now rook c5 again. Bishop e7, rook a5, b6, another pretty useless move. I'm just weakening the 7th rank for no reason. Just wanted to make a move quickly. But it was also maybe not bad, yeah. I should probably just follow it up with b5 on the next move and then try to push immediately. I played bishop f6 instead, now king e4, rook b2, knight g4, mistake, king f3 was best. Okay. And rook e2 check, mistake. I should go bishop e7 immediately. Interesting. The funny thing is I only thought about this idea later, as we will see. But when I played it later, it was not as good anymore. Let's see what happened in the game. So I gave a check first and then went here. And what did I go for? Yeah, here it was bishop e7, yeah. But at this point he could have gone to the rook endgame, yeah. This is actually what I was thinking about, what he might do. Take on king e4. And he's probably going to get this pawn just on the next move. I can get the pawn on h2, but then also b6 will fall. Should be quite a simple draw, actually. This passed pawn doesn't really matter here. White's rook is very active on the 7th rank as well. So that's actually a bit of a shame here. Like, if I would have spotted this idea just to move the bishop, I would have probably played it immediately here. Because now this knight on g4 is in a pretty bad place. And he needs to go back king f3 and then again knight f2. But now at least I want some time, and maybe I can finally start pushing the pawn like this, for example. Yeah, this is what happened in the game. I gave a couple of checks. I was very low on time. We both were. Of course, knight takes f6 here might be the concretest way to equalize. But he played king e4, and now I found the idea of bishop e7, trying to keep the game alive. And here it started to be unpleasant for him. So he needed to, I think from a practical standpoint, it was important to go into the rook endgame at this point. Yeah, I played h4 to get some space for the knight, but it's actually on h2 it also has some drawbacks, as we will see. And h4 is already not a great move to make, because he is weakening the pawn on g3 as well. And knight h2 was actually the final blunder of the game. I think after that I did not give away the advantage anymore. He should still go back to f2, but it's still equal at this point. But white needs to be careful. Yeah, like if rook e1 check, king f3, rook e3, just king g2, I guess. Like I was thinking here that I could get some ideas with g6. Maybe I can start with g6 first. Like if he doesn't do anything now, then I want to play this idea with rook e1, rook e3, and that this pawn is going to be isn't going to be hanging on the 7th rank. But maybe I can start pushing. Yeah, maybe also immediately b5. White still needs to be a bit careful in all of those positions. However, knight h2 threw the game away, because now I have rook e1 check. And if he goes king f3 now, after rook e3 check, the pawn on d3 is not covered. So he needed to go knight f2 for that reason. King takes d4, bishop f6 check. I actually didn't even realize at first that I'm winning. But yeah, I'm just cutting off his king completely. King c4, rook c1 check, and now king d5 even. King b5 might have been a better defense for that reason, because now if king d5, there's rook d7. But I thought now I can go rook g1 and just pick up this pawn, and also this one. The knight is also quite in some danger to get trapped. Yeah, if here rook g1, then at least he has a check on the 5th rank. That's why I didn't go for it here. But now I have king d5, because rook d7, there's king c6, because the king is not on b5. Yeah, so knight f3, rook b1 check, king is completely cut off, and now I'm starting to push the pawn, b5 check, and rook d1 finally, the last idea. Now we cannot prevent that I'm taking on d3 with a check. And here there are probably a couple of different wins. Like I thought I could go to this rook endgame and it should be winning. But I chose the quickest with b4, knight e4, b3 check. And if he goes to the back rank, it's checkmate. And if king a3, which he played, b2 check, and he resigned. I have 2 wins, I think, here, which I can choose from: rook a3 check or rook d1. I would have probably went for this one, and now I can take the queen. And he does not have any chances of getting a fortress. I can even give a check first and only then take, so that he even cannot win this pawn. And of course, if he goes to a1, if he goes to b1, then check, and promoting on the next move. Yeah, so finally, to conclude, his final mistake was actually at this point with knight h2. If he played knight f2, he can still continue fighting. However, it's still not so easy. And here I feel sorry for him, yeah, because he did have knight takes f6, and king e4 should have probably ended in a draw. But still, the trend, I think, was good good for me throughout the game. So it's not like the result was completely unfair. And of course, I'm very satisfied and very happy with how the day today went. 2 out of 2, and I think I'm co-leading the tournament now. Obviously, a huge win also for tournament standings. And yeah, tomorrow thank God, there's only 1 round, because now I'll go to sleep and probably not wake up until lunch. Let's see. All right, if some of you are still here watching the whole video, let me know in the comment section down below. It's always amazing for me to read that people watch the whole video and actually enjoy it as well, even after 2 games being played and me being visually completely exhausted. Thank you all for supporting me. Thank you all for watching this, and hope you enjoyed the stream. Today was Kostya Kawutsky who was streaming. I watched a couple of bits there. It looked great, as all of the other streams did as well. Let me know how you enjoyed, and apart from that, I will see you guys tomorrow after my game with the next recap.